Yes, or you'd either do the diesel doctor, or you get on the radio and just tell them, you know, I'm having problems with such and such, and then another locomotive engineer that's on the territory somewhere, you know, would say, well, this is what you have to do, and so you do that, and it pretty well works, you know.
Yeah, that's right, because there's always someone else who's had the similar problem, and they'll, you know, I mean, what I loved about the job when I first joined, because all the drivers that I met back in the 70s, they'd come off the steam days. So, and the funny thing was, one of the guys told us on one of the interviews, he said when he first went for his schooling to be an engineman, they were still teaching the steam engine. He said they didn't have any steam engines. He goes, they hadn't updated the training. So he said it was all a bit, it wasn't useless, but it wasn't helpful either. So again, you're learning it on the fly, you know.
Well, I ran steam trains. I ran the steam locomotives.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Now, what did you love about steam?
Hated
it. Because it's too much hard work.
Well, it's not like they had this. We had steam generators, okay.
Yeah, right.
But it didn't matter. They'd shut down through the trip, or you know, it was hard to keep them going.
Yeah,
you know? And then of course with the old passenger cars, if you know had no steam, they'd freeze up, and you know. You froze.
Yeah, I think it's I'm sort of sad I never actually got to work on, you know, the steam locomotives, because they've still got them there for, you know, the historical runs and all those sort of things. And a couple of my mates, they did manage to get on steam and drive that, and I thought it would have been great. But back in the day when steam was, you know, the thing, I mean, tough job. Like they're a machine, like they're an animal, they're a monster, they're alive. Like. My mate said he went for a ride on one, and he said they were really hooking along, you know, high speed. And he said, you know, when you think about it, these guys did it naturally. Like there's only a little window they can look out that runs down, or they got to stick their head out, and they're double checking the signals. And I said, you were concentrating and working all the time, but to them, if you went back in time, they'd just be doing it like you and me are talking now.
That's
you know?
Yeah.
I think it's
think nothing of it, you know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think amazing. Again, like all that you learn when you're doing it, you know.
Yeah.
And I heard a few stories from some of the old drivers, which obviously I can say because they're all, God rest their souls, gone. But he said you'd have a few blokes to be out in the booze. One night they just come to work. He said it was gone within 2 hours. He said the fireman's sweating, drinking water. He said he didn't come to work drunk, but he said whatever alcohol was in his system was gone within 2 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, tough job. But it's all different now. Like when I go back to Australia, I usually pop around and see a few of the different yards, and whole different system. And the guys that have been on, like, they still love the job, they like it, and they said, but it is different. Like it's a business now. Like it's run by professional companies, and they're not treating guys badly. But he said it just changed the dynamic between, you know, back in the day where like very close knitted family to now people are still friends, but it's just more business like. Which is a bit hard if you've been in the railways a long time because you're used to the old style connections, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that'd be the same in any railway anywhere around the world, because there is just something special about it, you know.
Yes.
So, you know, like we used to call it shunting. I know you guys call it switching, but we had our shunt yards where we used to make up the old trains. We had the shunt engine. Yeah. You say you. How does that happen now? Because I know now it's all different, because mainly it's all big containers and.
Well, yes, but there's still a lot of boxcars and freight.
Okay.
But basically now they all come in marshaled. All the trains come in marshaled, and they'll say, okay, double over such and such in the number. You do that cut of cars, and then okay, you pull up, come to that number, you take that car, and then you double that batch over onto another track, and then you pull the pin, and away you go. And you get 12 and a half miles to do that, like for the mileage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right. And like I know where I originally started in Adelaide, one of our big main yards called Mile End, that's gone. And if you get a chance, when you have a look at some of the other interviews, there's some old photos there. I think Doug's posting up soon of the old yards and Mile End where we started, which was the big depot. And now when I go back there, when I visit Australia, it's a suburb with houses because I can still see the locomotive shed. I can see the booking on room, and what we used to call the Goofy house is the lunchroom, because they called it the Goofy house because it was just whatever went on in there was a bit goofy. That's crazy, but it's funny. Like, we had a terrific guy on the other day. I remember Bob Sampson. I was a driver on the suburban trains in Adelaide, and he was one of the porters and guards, but he's taken up the historical side, the museum side of rails, and he's got some really interesting paraphernalia and stories. And he did a lot what you did. He started off and he didn't stick with one job. He became a signalman. He was a shunter. He did so much. The only thing he didn't do was become a driver, he said, but he did everything else, even into working in admin and that. So it's really interesting when you talk to guys who've had experience around the whole area of railway and what they liked, and, how it's sat with them when they were in the railways,
Well, another, when I was working in Montreal, we had the old electrics that used to run through the tunnel. You couldn't have the diesel because you'd smoked everything out. So, but the electrics, the latest one was a 1952 electric engine.
Yeah.
And the oldest one was a 1947.
Wow.
electric engine. And oh my God! So you had to learn to drive them, and no speedometer, no nothing. You had to count. You had to count your posts to see if you're speeding or not.
Right. That's funny. That's funny. What happens when you lose count?
Well, this is it, But and they were leaking. If it was raining, you'd get water in there, and you got thousands of volts of electricity right behind you, and you're hopefully that nothing goes wrong, because I'm not going there.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
We had funny engines like that. Actually, you can't. Where's my head? Get out of the way, Andy.
I see one there.
Yeah, that one there. Yeah, that's an electric locomotive. We called it an L class. It had a similar shape to the one in front there, but they were used for passenger and freight back in the day. But powerful, quiet, and the cab. I think Doug's trying to get a photo from Bob Sampson, actually. A photo of the cab. You could have had a ball in the cab. It was that big. Like, they were huge cabs. Like, really big. Like, I would be sitting one side, the driver there, or vice versa, but you had all this space behind you. Like, you could have run little laps around inside the cab. It was amazing. But obviously they outdid their time, because they didn't have the overhead wires in a lot of suburbs. They do now, but they weren't keeping up with the locomotives, what they could pull. But they were great. They were so quiet, very quiet. And good on passenger trains, they were. Hey, Dougie, sorry, mate, as I always say, when we start talking railways, we forget you're there, but we never forget you're there. Have you got any, you got some questions, I'm sure, Dougie?
Yeah, I must ask you, Cecil, come to think of it, does Union Pacific have a partnership with Canadian Pacific, considering the locomotives behind me, or how'd that come to be?
There's a partnership. There's and a lot of those Union Pacifics are leased locomotives. So if CP is running short of locomotives, they'll lease from Union Pacific or CSX or whatever. Same with CN. If they're short of locomotives, it's cheaper for them to lease a locomotive until they don't need it anymore, and then and it's all a write-off.
Well, yeah,
cool. Pretty cool. Another question I must ask is, considering the long trains that you've mentioned, did one locomotive pull the whole train, or did several do it in one sitting?
Well, right now with the new locomotives now, they'll have a big locomotive because they're 4,500 horsepower.
Yeah, wow.
Okay, and then they'll have one in the middle, and sometimes they'll have one at the tail end of the train. But yeah. So yeah.
So and they're all run obviously from radio control from the front head end loco.
Yes, yeah, they're all ran from the lead locomotive. Yeah, and if something happens, they shut down. You can try and start it from the lead locomotive.
Yeah, okay. You're hoping you can start it from the lead locomotive.
But it happened one time in Brockville there was they were had to pull into for passenger trains, clearing the passenger trains, so they had to pull in. So they were going to be there for about a half an hour or so. So okay, you shut everything down, you leave it running, but you shut your generator field off and your engine run off. Well, the middle locomotive wasn't getting the signal, and it dug a hole in each track.
Wow.
Yeah, and then they went to leave, and of course it broke apart.
Oh man, sheesh.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's why you've got to have. That was a good question, Doug. That's why eventually time will come where they're saying that you won't have people on the locomotives, but I think that's going to be a long time off because you still need a human being on any machinery.
They've been trying for years and years, and right now, it's a safety issue. It's a safety issue.
That's right. Yeah.
And even on the passenger trains, they're trying to only get one locomotive on the passenger trains because you have two. Okay, and it's a safety issue. If that locomotive something happens, okay. Yeah, your alerter will come on if nothing's touched within 60 seconds.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you couldn't derail within that 60 seconds.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
and it's like the bullet train. They still, even though that's controlled, I think, from a tower, there's still a guy on there. There's still a guy at the front, and I just don't think it's like I wouldn't be on a plane if there was no pilot on there. They could fly a plane now without a pilot, but if everyone knew that there's no one up front, it's like, you know what, technology's great, but
it's just like these cars now, these Uber cars or whatever. No driver. Well, stay out of my way. I don't want to see you.
I know, right? It's going to take a bit for us. Older generation get that around. I personally myself, I understand technology and I go with it, but I still don't think you'd take the human element out of everything, especially when it deals with transport, planes, trucks, cars, trains, all that sort of thing, even if it's just peace of mind.
There's too many crossings at grade, railroad crossings at grade. They have to completely eliminate all those crossings.
Oh, of course, yes, yeah,
and it's thousands and thousands of dollars.
Oh, of course it would. Yeah. Sure. But that's. I mean, I don't think we're going to have to worry too much about it, mate. Won't be seeing too much of that in our time. It's But look, Doug, have you got any more questions? Because we're definitely going to talk to you again, Cecil. What we like to do is, bring people on, and if you have any photos or anything that you'd like to send us, please do send to Doug, and then he can add them to the video for people to
Oh,
see.
I will. Yeah, I've got lots of photos I can send you.
Oh, that'd be awesome, mate. That'd be great. Because what the platform's about, and I sort of thought about the other day, it is for people, obviously, who are interested in the railways, absolutely. But a bigger thought came to me is that it's actually a legacy for families of us when we're all passed on to the next world, that people can still come and look at this and see grandpa or dad or whatever, you know, like grandkids can see people leaving a legacy of what they used to do, which is better than looking in a photo album, you know. So
I had permission when they were from CN, my supervisor in Ottawa, and I brought my wife on a trip to Brent, Ontario. Oh, did she ever love it? Did she love it? Oh, you know,
yeah,
especially
I bet.
with the moose and the bear and the bears and
yeah. It's an experience to be on a locomotive, like you know, especially when you're either moving at speed, like on a passenger train, or on a big freight train that's over a mile or something long, and you're sitting on a high speed. It's pretty awesome to know you got a lot of steel moving on steel at quite a big speed. And one of the drivers said the other day, he said it is an art to drive a train, and it is an art, you know.
It's a challenge.
Yeah, it sure is. And especially nowadays well, even back in the day when the trains weren't as long, it's still, because they were still heavy, they were still long. And where we worked in Adelaide, we have what they call the Adelaide Hills, which is a really, I can't give you the quote at the moment, but it's a very steep grade. And, you know, that's a place where you don't lose your air, you know, like, and back in the time, of course, dynamic braking was used, but that between that and air, but nowadays the dynamic brakes, from what I understand, are very powerful, and you can pretty much pull a train up.
I remember I was in the siding there and leaving the yard in Macmillan Yard in Toronto, and we had to pull into the siding because it was single track, and there was a big freight train heading in, and so we pulled in. I was right to the signal, and the tail end was just clear of the signal.
Wow!
So we're uphill. It's a straight up. The grade was I forget where the grade was. It was steep. So I called the dispatcher and I said, "Can you give me the light at the rear end, the tail end of the train, just in case it starts to roll back on me?"
Yeah.
He says, "No, you've got the light up front. Go." He says, "Well, I'm just forewarning you. If it happens to roll back, then it goes through the light. I asked you for the light." And so anyways, so what I did was I put the throttle in number 3 and I released the brake.
Yeah.
And first thing I know, it was moving ahead. It didn't go in the back. It didn't run out on me. So I was lucky.
Yeah, and it could run out because you could slip. Anything could happen, you know. And I don't know if you guys did it, but back in the time in Adelaide, a big thing back then was power braking, which was keeping the dynamic off, keeping it notched up, and then using the independent brake, lap it, and then service it, then keep the train stretched, and then release it and keep. But they don't do it anymore. They just dynamic brake, or what they call what did he call it? Oh gosh, my mind just went blank.
Well, I used to power brake. But oh my God, it was hard on the equipment, you know.
Yeah, that's what they said. Yeah, and that's why he said nowadays the less you have to touch anything. That's right, momentum driving, where the weight of the train just takes you everywhere. He said less stress on the train, less brakes used, and you're right. It was a lot of stress because you're stressing it.
The only thing with power braking too is you never know where you're going to stop.
Yeah.
You know, because once that takes hold, and you could just die right there, drowning in the spot, and then you have to let your train charge up with air again, and before you left. So that's why I didn't do it. I only done it once or twice, but
Yeah. They did. It was a real big thing back in the time in Adelaide, South Australia. It was just pretty much used all the time until obviously now they've just gone, dynamic brakes are better. You don't need to stress the train out. And but my mate the other day in Sydney, he sent me a video of this downhill grade he was on, and he said he had to stop. It was a big train, very long, very heavy, but he had to stop nearly 3 times, even using dynamic brake and air. He had to pull the train up, get his air back and go because it was such a steep grade. He said you couldn't risk, even just the dynamic brakes were good, but it's very, very steep. And on a long, heavy train, he said, I think it was coal trains, he said, you just got to pull up, slow it down, then take off again, common sense.
Yeah, there's a video of me going from Ottawa to Brent on YouTube.
Oh, is there?
If you look at CN, you go Ottawa to Brent, Ontario.
Okay.
And there's a couple of videos of the last run. Well, I wasn't on that one, but a buddy of mine there, he came with me, and he took the video. He's a trainman.
Cool.
And yeah. But,
awesome. I'll get Doug. Doug will find that and we'll stick it up on here, mate,
Yeah, all right. I can find it. I can send you the link.
Oh, okay. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, do that.
You don't really see a picture of me, but you hear me talking.
Well, we know what you sound like.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, look, that's pretty much it for now, but we are definitely going to catch up with you again. And Cecil, if you have any of your old mates or current drivers still working that would like to jump on, please let them see the link so they understand what it's all about. And if they want to jump on, we'd love to have a chat to them as well.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. I do. I've got lots of buddies that are still hanging around.
Oh, great. That'd be awesome. Yeah, that'd be really cool. Oh, that'd be great, Cecil. Well, okay, Douglas, I'll take it over to you, mate, and we'll end this one, but we'll definitely be talking again to Cecil.
Okay.
All righty, everyone. I want to thank you all for tuning in on tonight's episode. And everyone, we will see you next week for the next episode of Tales from the Rails.